Well, gang, it's like Willy Wonka's factory of news tonight. Let's jump straight in with what the national broadsheet is talking about, because I think it's on the lips of every single Australian. The headline of The Australian reads, "End of the emergency rates era." Borrowers face a string of rate rises that could see the official cash rate reach 2.5% by the end of next year, after Reserve Bank Governor Philip Lowe said emergency monetary policy settings were ending in response to rising inflation and the lowest unemployment in 50 years. The RBA decision on Tuesday to lift the cash rate by 25 basis points from 0.1 to 0.35% will add about $85 to monthly repayments on a $600,000 mortgage, assuming that the banks pass on each hike in full. Nick, we'll start with you. Look, 2010 was a long time ago since we saw this story splashed across the front page. How do you think that this is going to go in the midst of a federal campaign?
Well, I think simply because it's such a rare thing, I think people are going to possibly read too much into it. I mean, it's a very small increase, right? 0.25%. And even if you look at the rises that are forecast over the next year or so, they're hardly getting back to the kind of levels some of us had to face when we bought our first houses. But, you know, I mean, 2010, as James Kirby points out on the front page of the Oz, who can remember where they were back then? I note that the Herald Sun helpfully points out that it was the last time Collingwood were AFL champions, so that does place it a long time ago.
Well, yeah, indeed. Look, Liv, I was probably wearing low-rider jeans and had eyebrows that were way too thin, thinner than this margin of what we're seeing between policies between the Libs and Labor at this point in time. You're in Canberra, you've been on the bus with Albo, and you're in this bubble. Did they predict that this was going to happen, and how do you think that the Prime Minister and Treasurer thwarted this today?
Well, look, it's not entirely unexpected. We obviously had that inflation increase last week, hitting just above 5%. So we knew what we expected an interest rate rise was on the cards. Now, I think it's quite interesting when it comes to the election and the response in the bubble, because Morrison wanted to fight this election on national security, and he had a bit of an error there when the Solomons signed an agreement with China under our noses, but then now the economy. And so he is going to be doing absolutely everything he can to say that he is still the man for the job. And he tried to sort of hose down any concerns over that today by basically pointing to the fact that the RBA increase this interest rate now because the economy can handle it, and explaining that wages, there's been a slight growth in that, and also unemployment is very low. So the Treasurer will be at the press club tomorrow, and I'm sure he'll be pressed on all of this, but they're going to be trying to paint a picture that everything's okay.
Yeah. Nick, how do the parties now pivot? Because this is probably going to be front and centre for the next couple of weeks as we head towards May 21. How do they engage with people that are probably not within the inner city, in the bubbles that we run in, be the media and politics? Because people that are not engaged and have great real lives outside of this only see the fact that things are getting more expensive and their home loan repayments are going to increase. How do they not then punish the government at the ballot box? How do they offset that messaging moving forward?
Well, this is a very interesting point, Jenna, because the coalition started by campaigning heavily on the economy. They would have, at that stage, wanted to keep the whole debate on the economy, and Anthony Albanese very helpfully obliged by making those fundamental errors in the very early days of the campaign, keeping us fixed on unemployment and interest rates, interestingly. Now, the economy is obviously still the big issue, but I've noticed, and internal polling is showing, that sentiment is moving to this extent, that the cost of living is very high on people's minds. And the two issues there are food and housing costs. Housing costs, particularly for younger people. This is quite a recent thing. It's certainly since the elections began that this has come to the top of people's agenda. So, yeah, I mean, I think the government's still got a very good case to make that they are generally better economic managers. And I mean, that's you've only got to look at history to show that is their strength. But it's difficult when you get onto things like food inflation, because you can't do what they did with petrol, which was to, halve excise duty. I don't know that they've got terribly concrete answers going forward, except to say that they are historically better managers, and this government has been a good economic management team.